Hey everyone, anyway, so starting off, and we'll of course edit this beautifully, so we'll come in to say, hi, good morning everyone, Donny here, Innovation Fika, 9 a.m. Wednesday morning, a 30-minute coffee break, 9-minute coffee break. We're so late, so we'll probably quickly be a 9-minute coffee break. A 30-minute coffee break with me, Donny, and all of my wonderful guests that graciously decide to, for some reason, come spend a half an hour with me. The world's fastest half an hour where I get to meet really interesting people to talk about really interesting things. Everything is recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so you will find 173 episodes on YouTube after this week. So I am jumping straight into the episode and saying, welcome to the show, Oren.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. And I will ask you the same question that I ask all of my guests. Who are you and what do you do? In a very, very short 1 minute.
In a quickie. My name is Oren. I'm based here in Stockholm after living in the US for many years, as well as the Middle East and South Asia for various reasons. What do I do? I work with impact leaders and their organizations to amplify the work that they do. So what does that mean? I work with social entrepreneurs and startup founders, nonprofit leaders, government officials, all folks, activists who recognize the importance of their own well-being in the work that they do. So how to sustain themselves while changing the world.
Yeah.
So I'm a coach, a facilitator, I run retreats, I do trainings, workshops, a whole variety of coaching one-on-one with groups. In order to support people to show up in ways that they want to, so they could do the work that they came to do.
Which, I mean, that's an incredible, thank you for doing that.
My pleasure.
And I think we always tend to forget about the team effort and what goes on around the show that we see and the people that we meet. We kind of sort of, we forget that as a whole thing that makes it work, and you are you play a very big part of that. Why did you decide to work? I don't know if this is the right way into the conversation, but
absolutely.
I mean, did you start with working in impact and impact leaders, or did you start working with leaders and then shifted to impact?
No, it's a great question. So I started working actually in international development, and I spent many years working particularly in conflict environments in Afghanistan, Yemen, and Iraq, places like that. And the work that I did focused primarily on systems and big institutions of governance.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we change parliament? How do we help countries transition to more democratic forms of being? And after years of that, which was interesting, and I still do a little bit of that work, I got quite disillusioned by how little was actually changing as a result. And I got really curious about the people who were putting themselves on the line in really difficult circumstances to try and affect change in their neighborhoods, in their communities, in their countries, and who are working on behalf of others. And I started working through a variety of accelerators and fellowship programs and other sort of platforms that gather these kind of impact leaders. And I realized that there was one kind of piece missing. So you'll know this, that in supporting entrepreneurs or leaders, there's a lot of sort of technical support processes. So if you want to know how to scale your business, there's an expert for that.
Yep.
There's an expert for social media strategy. There's an expert for everything. But what we weren't doing was really focusing on the leaders themselves and saying, well, what do you need to do in order to wake up every morning and against all odds, do the work that you're doing on education, poverty, climate, whatever those huge issues are. And being a leader is hard enough. When you're doing something, taking on a huge issue, a big social issue, there are additional stresses, additional triggers that need to be addressed. And then treating the individual as sort of a holistic person. We all get up, we all fight with our partners, we all have issues with kids or neighbors, or like those kinds of things filter into the work that we do. And having spaces to talk about it, to understand it, to normalize it, and work through it is really important, so that when you show up at the office, when you show up with the team, you're good to go.
Yeah.
And you're supporting others in their holistic selves to do the work as well. So it's the human aspect of it that really kind of drove me to it, and the gap there, because we focus on the technical fixes a lot, right? And what we're missing is that soft sort of human piece, which is vitally important. So how do I sustain myself in this work? To me, is a really interesting question.
Last week I had another really good old friend, Tommy Lundberg, who is a really good Swedish copywriter. And we worked together 20 years ago. We were reminiscing, and we talked about 20 years ago when we did campaigns. We were working in a big trade union, and we were doing campaigns on helping middle managers stay sane and survive. It was, and we were reflecting last week on, how little has changed. And one of the things we were talking about then, and I was nodding along as you were saying, because I agree with everything you're saying, 100%. And back then we were saying that we know it's the human factor that moves the needle in a company. We know it's the people that motivate people. We know this. Yet the only tools we have to measure is an Excel sheet with red and black numbers.
Right.
And that's the only thing we measure. We can only measure the things we can measure, and we don't try and measure the things that we find difficult to measure.
Exactly.
And that was then. And then fast forward 20 years, and this is I'm going to send this episode. If she's not watching now, I'm going to send this episode to Hannah, because I'm part of a big national project in Sweden that we started last year, based on, because Hannah's been working with leadership for a long time, and you need to get in. Hannah and Oren, I'll connect you on LinkedIn. This is good. Because I was going on again about if we want people to build the companies of the future, we need to build the foundation in the people to become the leaders of the future.
Absolutely.
My sort of pet peeve is that the last 20 years we've been doing everything not wrong, but we've been doing a lot of things wrong, because when I was a young leader way back, there was these big organizations, and you went to like leadership courses and management training, and you in this ladder of climbing through a hierarchy, and then suddenly we started taking kids out of college when they're like 18, 19, throwing them in a startup and say, here's $1 million, build something, employ 2,000 people, good luck. And in a joking kind of way, the ones we picked were the most socially oriented ones. There's like tech guys with hoodies, here you go, here's 2,000 people, run this company.
Right. And
then we're surprised when it goes wrong.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right.
So we need to work more with the people.
Absolutely.
And coming back to you, I didn't mean to hijack the conversation.
No. But I mean, you're making my point is that we have expectations of leaders today that are unreasonable, and we're not preparing them in ways so that they succeed. And so if I'm an investor, say, I don't only want to put money in a company. I want to accompany that with, okay, here's somebody that you can talk to, who you can process. Because if you're a CEO or a founder of a startup, you can't talk to your investors. You can't talk to your board. You can't talk to your employees. You're lucky if you could talk to your co-founders on a good day. So who do you talk to just kind of get a bit of perspective, to sort of pull back and say, I'm not sure the company's going in the direction I want it anymore, or I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. We need to create those spaces individually for teams. And then also there's something magic that happens when you get peers at the same level together who can sort of take off the mask. We can stop pretending. You don't have to have a company that's X factor successful, and talk about how difficult it can be to motivate staff, or to manage up your investors, or all of the things that everybody is dealing with, but nobody's talking about. And so whatever the challenge is, add shame on it, because you think, oh, I'm the only one. Everybody else seems to be successful. Everybody else has this romantic idea of what it means to be a founder.
Thank you, Instagram, for that one, by the way.
And let's sort of poke a hole in that and say, you know what? This is amazing work that you're doing, but it's not easy. And you need support. And we're willing to support you in a whole variety of ways, including in your sort of personal capacity. Let's have that conversation. And let's make it okay to have coaches, to have therapists, to show up and have the challenges that everybody's experiencing. Let's be okay talking about it.
I think that's... Look at this. Matteo Bornico. Great to see you, Oren.
Hey, Matteo, good to see you.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Anybody else coming online, just say who you are, say hi, and sorry we couldn't get the chat on the screen here today. We've had a bit of a technical glitch, but we're live online. No, I was just going to say that again. You know, I think you're nailing it because it's such a. It can be so lonely, and the perception is, of course, no, you don't go to the board and say, I don't think I can do this.
Right.
I feel I'm not worthy. I know I can't. You know, I'm not enough, kind of thing. Yeah. Because you're expecting them to want you to be the one that push through. Because and especially the investors. I mean, hey, they bet it on you because they think you're the guy or girl to do it. So you don't want to go to them and say, I'm not sure this is going to work.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And those two issues actually, are loneliness and self-doubt, imposter syndrome. Are probably the two issues I deal with most.
Yeah.
And having worked with dozens and dozens of folks, and this is interesting, from all over the world. So this isn't like a European-centric thing, or this isn't an American perspective, is that there are common challenges that leaders face. And even folks who have objectively achieved success are saying, you know what, I'm just waiting for them to figure out that I'm a fraud and I don't know what I'm doing. And it happens at very high levels where you'd expect, okay, you've got your stuff figured out, like you're a confident person who's moving forward in the world, and given the opportunity. And I think it's very healing in a way to be able to say, I don't know what I'm doing half the time, and that's okay because nobody else does either. But we pretend, and we put on this show and this pretense that this is, you know, the perfect life and everything. And yeah, Instagram, social media makes that that narrative. It's a hype narrative that doesn't reflect reality. And so I think it's amazingly courageous for folks in leadership positions to come out and do this kind of work and talk about it and say, it's hard. It's still worth doing. It doesn't make me less qualified because I'm worried about it. I have fears and concerns. It makes me stronger because I can actually work through them and I can do the work. Because this is all, particularly on the social impact side, these are marathons. None of us are going to accomplish this generation or in a lifetime, right? And so we all need to be sort of working together and figuring out how to have these conversations so that we can drop the excess baggage. Yeah. Because that's what it is. Yeah. It's like worrying about whether you're good enough isn't helping you be good enough to do the work. And so if we can let go of that and kind of shed some of that extra weight, we'll be more agile and more energetic to do the work that we came to do.
Yeah. Yeah, again, just, I mean, just nodding along. I'm not, and then tying into that then, the marathon thing is one thing that I feel ties into this is that another thing I talk about a lot is that I'm sort of accusing the system. I mean, I'm part of the system, so I mean, it's us, right?
Yeah.
Of building an incorrect narrative the last 20, 25 years, because it's all about do this weekend thing, start a startup and run like mad, and then boom, and you know, starting something is super easy. You know, getting people together with coffee, say, let's start something. I say, at 24 hours, boom, 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 and then knocking somebody on the shoulder, but it's going to take 10 years until you be able to pay yourself a decent salary. Right. So 10 years? It's like, wasn't it a weekend thing? Right. No, it's a, you know. So and I'm not saying it. I'm just saying when I was 20 years old, the narrative was it takes 7 years to build a business. You know, and because they were like just the startup thing was getting started then, but it was like it takes 7 years to build a business, and you know that's absolutely. But then suddenly overnight it was like, okay, well now you just raise some money, you run to the bank, you know, you run, employ lots of people, and then and that ties into as well what we're expecting people to be. Yeah. And their sort of mental. You know, perseverance as well. What kind of you know, I won't call it mental stamina. That's the wrong word. Stamina is no. I don't mean that. But you know what I know.
Yeah. And I think part of it, I do think it's a narrative problem, and I think that it's so easy to romanticize what this life or this ecosystem is like, when the truth is, part of the problem is that when you, particularly in sort of the startup world, it's like if you're not sleeping in your office and working 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week, you're doing something wrong.
Didn't we leave that behind in 99, 2000?
You know what? I don't think so. I don't think so, because you have prominent tech billionaires who live that and promote that. So that culture is still there.
I know.
At the highest levels. But I work with a lot of folks for whom taking vacations, they can't do it. There's guilt, there's worry. What's going to happen to the business? What's going to happen to the communities that I'm serving? Which there's a problem with that, because there's this notion that if we don't move at 150 miles an hour, if we don't build quick and fast and are agile, then somehow it's not worth it. Mm-hmm. And what happened to sort of the slow burn and building it with balance and maintaining relationships and friendships and hobbies? And I mean, it has become a badge of honor to not sleep enough, to survive on coffee and energy drinks, like that kind of stuff. Even though it seems like an old narrative, I think it's still pervasive. Well, yeah, definitely. I think it's still there.
Of course it is. I mean, you have the 4 a.m. boss. I get up at 4 a.m. every day. Exactly. I read 5 books. I meditate. I have my green tea that I picked myself in the Himalayas, and then I swim for 25 miles. Yeah. And then it's not even 7 a.m. yet.
Right.
And then I hit the office and I do 1,000 emails before people come in.
That's it. And when you model that kind of behavior, there are no breaks. There are no cracks in that.
But I'm going to swear, and I get that. Damn it, I'm going to say, because we know this. I mean, and that's why it annoys me, because I grew up in a leadership environment. I mean, mm-hmm. that was my first job, was being a leadership and being taught leadership and teaching leadership, because I was in the army for 10 years. And there were so many things that came into things like stress. I mean, this is fundamental stuff that we've known for. Stress is a physical reaction to something that we perceive as threatening, and it's like a turn on, turn off thing, right? But then we live in an environment where we have this constant low stress, which we never burn off. Right. So it's not on off. It's always sort of on, which is super deteriorating. Yep. So I mean that's one part of it. And then when I'm out teaching things like innovation and creativity, and I meet companies that they've been so efficient in becoming lean that have taken away all the slack, all those micro pauses and things like that, and they're just efficient, and they're complaining about that they're not creative anymore, because they're only producing, they're not creating, right? Mm-hmm. So that's another part of it. And I'm going. So I'm looking at all of this. I'm going. Don't you ever take a step back and see what we're doing? I mean, because you want to kick people out of the office at 5 o'clock and say, go home. Yeah. Spend time forget about the office. Go home. Spend time with your family. Be happy, have a joyful life. Fill your brain with new fantastic inputs, and then come back tomorrow, and then we'll talk about it again. Absolutely. And you'll have lots of new ideas.
It seems so simple, right? Because when you're on a low grade sort of stress, you're not collaborating, you're not creative, you're not sort of above the line, right? You're in survival mode. Yeah. And when you're just trying to make it through, great things are not happening, right? And so what do we need to do as leaders, as investors, as boards, as academic institutions, as support systems for leaders generally, to make it okay to be human? I mean, that's all we're saying. Like, this isn't sort of excuses, or this is just sort of saying, hey, we all have the same makeup, we all deal with the same things. Let's be okay with normalizing it, and if it takes a week longer, a month longer, a year longer, if we're there at the end of it to see the success, whatever success is, so be it. But there's such an emphasis on go. But that's and it's not just the business world. I mean, this is everywhere, I know. Right?
Matteo here, as a leader, thank you for the question. As a leader, should we also aim to create a culture where these vulnerable conversations are accepted? should we be hiring for people that can handle these sorts of conversations?
That's a great question. Absolutely yes. And I think that there is a mistake that vulnerability equals weakness, right? Brene Brown talks a lot about this, particularly in professional settings. And there's this sort of myth that if you bring your personal stuff into the office, sort of all hell's going to break loose and it's going to be this big mess. And that's obviously not what we're talking about. But in my experience, having worked with some people self-select themselves and are sort of ready for these conversations. They're hungry for it. But even folks who aren't, I think we're in a moment or at a time where people are hungry to connect in meaningful ways. And that's to the vulnerability point, Matteo, is that given the opportunity, it's hard to take the first step, particularly in a professional setting. But given the opportunity, and that's where, discussion circles, fikas, like places out within your professional sphere, but that normalize the expression of, I'm having a hard time. It doesn't mean I'm not going to do my job. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to follow through and meet deadlines. I just want to recognize that I'm going through a divorce right now, and I'm not on my A game all the time. I'm working on it. Let's just knowing that and then being able to move forward. So yeah, I do think that we need to create spaces, even in professional settings, where it's okay to have open and honest conversations, recognizing that it doesn't slow us down. I think it makes us sort of more compassionate, more understanding, and ultimately more creative and more productive at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, you want a group, if you're building an organization, you want a group of human beings to be a part of that organization. And that means that as a leader, you have to address them as human beings, which means, a person is not a part of a person. It's a person, and it's kind of your job as a leader to make it work. Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of sports references, but one thing I do often reference is the sports coach and the leader as a coach on the side of the field, not playing the game, actually putting a team together, enabling them to play the best game they can play together, and staying out of the game. Because you're not the one to rush in and actually score the goal yourself.
I like that.
They score the goal. Yeah. You put the team together, to enable them to score goals. And that was another lesson, hard learned, when young cadet in the army, and I was in the engineers, and we were like building a bridge somewhere, and things were falling apart, and I wanted to go in and fix it, and somebody pulled me and said, "No,
that's amazing.
You stand here and you watch it and you direct it and you let them do their damn job, because that's why they're here. Right? Because if you're going to do their job for them, then you don't need them."
Yep. No, absolutely. Kind of and sometimes the hardest thing, but the best thing a leader can do is just get out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, every joke in the office is the day the boss leaves the office, it works better. Yeah. Yeah. Proven point. No, but okay, coming back to you then, and how you actually work then with leaders, and specifically impact leaders that have maybe, you just say that they have a harder time or an easier time because they are driven by some kind of purpose?
No, they have a harder time. I mean, leadership is difficult, and I don't mean to compare it or to diminish, but folks who are trying to affect some kind of social change, whether they're working on climate or energy or poverty, education, whatever those things are, they're often driven or come to the work because they've personally been affected by it, right? So there's more of perhaps a calling, and they, as a result, they often have a harder time separating themselves. It's not just a job. This is what I'm here to do. Yeah. And my community, whoever I'm serving is expecting greatness. And that's sort of by intention, that's beautiful. But in practicality, that's a quick route to burnout, right? Yeah. And so we need to be very careful, particularly for that subset of leaders who can so easily over-identify, and it becomes, they live it, they breathe it, and they can't escape it. And again, as leaders, they're not then in the best shape that they can be, right? And so for mission-driven leaders, I think there's kind of in my experience, there's almost like a higher vulnerability to burnout and to, and it's a can be a slow process to burnout, where they're just less effective, they can't focus as much, they're not engaging personally as much, they're not bringing their best selves to the work, and you can kind of see if they don't adjust course, they just kind of run out.
Yeah.
They just run out of energy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
So how do you work with them? And so what do you help them do? So in a practical manner.
Well, it depends, of course, on the context, but with leaders or founders, if I'm working with them collectively, there's a lot of one-on-one coaching and sort of understanding. I mean, self-awareness is sort of a big piece here, right? Is understanding where they are, given their circumstances, and to begin to get clarity on where they want to go. And then almost how to get there is the easier part, right? I think we buy into our own stories of, well, on anything, my boss, my this, my that, and we sort of lose ourselves in there. So a lot of the work that I do in a practical matter is helping folks clear away the noise and focus on what's important to them. Because to me, that's one of the biggest problems we have, is that when we're not aligned with the things that really matter. So we can easily get distracted, we can make poor decisions, we can communicate poorly or say and do things that aren't coherent with what matters to us, and get ourselves in trouble. So a lot of the work is first saying, well, what matters to you? Like, hey, why are you doing this? Not in a questioning way, but like, what are the values that it embodies for you? What is it important for you, the climate or the tech or whatever it is? And being crystal clear on that, because I think that's a great starting point to say, okay, when all hell breaks loose, I can come back to whether it's my why, my values, whatever those core beliefs are. And then understanding also, helping them see that, okay, we're going to separate the noise by understanding that the noise often is a natural part of the work, right? And so you talked about sort of the worry and the fear being sort of a natural response. I think we know about the negativity bias. We know that the mind tends to focus on the threats, the perceived threats. And so, you could go through a day, have 9 great things happen, 1 bad thing happen, you come home to your partner, and what do you start with? Oh man, my boss, da-da-da-da-da. But what happened to all those other things? So it's a great, it's a self-protection mechanism, which is wonderful, but it gets us into trouble because we're constantly looking for threats and the things that can go wrong, and that's what we focus on. Having an understanding of that means that there's no personality defect or anything if you focus on the negative. It's just recognizing that you can pull yourself out of it and say, okay, observe what's actually happening, and then you don't have to experience it. And once you can do that, I think you can see more clearly what's coming ahead. Also in coaching, and this I love, particularly when it works well, is that you don't, particularly for this area, you don't need an expert to tell you what to do. You just need somebody to hold the space so that you can see your own answers, which inevitably are there, right? You just need to sort of move away from some of the chatter and say, oh, well, this is actually what I want to do. And you know what, if I could, like, this is what I'd love to see happen, boom, you're off to the races. Yeah. It's hard to get there on your own sometimes. Oh, yeah. And so having that space, a non-judgmental sort of safe space to say, yeah, well, if I were doing, and then it just happens really quickly, right? And
self-coaching is usually not the way to go, because the other voices, it will always be, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Who do you think you are? And why would that work? And that we trip ourselves up.
Oh, yeah.
And so sort of having somebody who can hold space like that, I think is really important. And so doing it individually, I think, is important. Doing it as a team. And what I like with teams, or what I found works well, is that when they have common language around concepts or tools, it's much easier, instead of getting in an argument with a colleague, to say, hey, look, I think we're having this kind of moment, whatever that is, right? And just say, okay, let's step back a little bit. What would we do if? Or, if Oren were here, what would he say? Even channeling that can be helpful. And speaking the same language, having the same tools, allows you to sort of get out of your own story and say, okay, what are we trying to do here? Can we go back to what matters to us as a team and whatever the specifics are?
The big takeaway from this conversation today is, as soon as you find yourself in a conflict in the workplace with your team, all you need to do is, hey, stop everyone. What would Oren say if he was here? There you go. That, you know, first step to getting somewhere.
It's a funny thing, but if you're able to stop, I mean, I think that's part of the story, is to say, okay, this is a story. It feels true, but it's not real, right? Being able to do that and saying, oh, what would I do if I weren't me in this situation? What would somebody who had these kind of core values, or who sort of wanted to accomplish this thing on behalf of others, what would I do sort of in a good moment? It just pulls yourself out of it.
I think it is, and it's scarily, eerily, that, I'm not saying easy as in, oh, it's so easy to do, but the mindset shift is just there, because just as you can self-suggest yourself into being depressed and not good enough and whatever, you can. It also works the other way. Not saying that you should blow yourself up into something you're not, but but I mean, I've had that situation as well. I was talking about creativity again, right? And we're talking about 4-minute monsters, which is a thing I use for things that get stuck in our culture that we take for granted, but are just stupid old things that are like, why are we doing it this way, right?
Yeah.
And I was in a situation with a bunch of people, and we've been talking about this 4-minute monster concept. And one guy was waffling on about yada yada, and then he just stopped and he said, "I'm doing it. I just did it. Do you hear?
Right.
I just did it." And everybody was like, "Yeah, wow,
that's it."
And it was such a moment.
It's brilliant, because if you could name it, right, you can see it. You don't have to experience it, right? You can sort of get yourself a bit of distance and say, "Wait a second, that's it. I'm doing it right now." And then other people can sort of like, "Oh, that's what that 4-minute monster means." Yes, but I think that we go through and we just constantly forget. Right? We just buy into our own stories and our own challenges and our own worries. And I think that one of the things I work with a lot with people is choice. We don't get to choose our thoughts, but we do get to choose what we focus our attention on. And so you want to focus on all the things that aren't going well? Okay, you could spiral out. And sometimes we choose that. That's okay. But we always have a choice. And some people find this very confronting, which I understand as well. But more people, I think, find it very empowering to say, okay, it doesn't have to be this way. I can pull back if I'm able to take that moment and breathe and say, okay, I could listen to this fear and worry, or I could shift to something more interesting and more important. And maybe that's values, maybe that's my why, maybe it's shedding or shining a light on sort of who I'm doing this work for and who it's going to benefit when all works well. And that shift, and it's an energetic shift, you can feel it, right? Like the story that you said about the guy who caught himself doing it. And that, like everything else, with practice, you get better at. I mean, it's a very simple, and it's a mindfulness kind of approach that if you're able to shift and shift and shift, and it's not once, it's just thousands of times a day, you just shift like, okay, is this what I want to focus on? And pull yourself out, and you can strengthen that muscle and say, okay, I want to focus on this, I want to focus on this, and just keep coming back to it and back to it.
I mean, I'm looking at the time. I mean, this is the world's it's the world's fastest half an hour. We're over time already. I know.
Amazing.
But I love having these very, very short. It's like just grabbing somebody in the office and say, hey, let's sit down and have a cup of coffee, and they're talking about something with somebody that you usually don't speak to. That's that's the whole thing. So, but if you want to leave our watchers and listeners with some final words, what would you want to say to them?
Well, probably nothing revolutionary, but still I think important is slow down, dare to slow down, dare to have the kinds of conversations that may not be common, but are important, and trust that when you're willing to go there, others will join you. And the the energy that can be released and the collective movement forward is amazing for individuals and for teams. And I think we shouldn't shy away from embracing sort of the more holistic understanding of leadership, and that we are humans, and even let's not romanticize and let's not imagine that nobody else is having this problem but me. Rest assured they are. From somebody who spends a lot of time in conversations with leaders who are going there all the time. Dare to, give yourself a break, have a little self-compassion, and dare to have those kind of conversations and to bring it up and to be a different kind of leader than maybe was modeled for you in the past. It's hard, and it takes courage, but I think that to me is a game changer.
Very good, very wise. I will also pick up something else you said, and I'll add that, is, find a place and or a person to speak to. It could be somebody, I have like a couple of friends from my life that I've known for 20, 30 years that I don't want to see them leave my life, right? So I've actually we have a booked lunch meeting every other week, me and one of my friends, and we meet for lunch every 2 weeks, booked in the calendar. So it's not just, hey, let's have lunch sometime. Right. And for me, just getting away from everything and meeting him that I've known since for 30 years, and just talk about other stuff, is without sort of, rationally reflecting on it. It's such an oasis of just, hey, how's it going? And then blah, 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 and completely just detaching from everything. Sometimes it's just an hour of complaining about the world or whatever.
So be it.
Or it's just whatever. But but you said it yourself. Find a place and a person to speak to. That's not the team or the board or the owners or the investors. Because you need to.
And we're wired for connection. Right. So it doesn't matter what you talk about, but. Yes, I think it's helpful to get away from the everyday, but just feeling listened to and heard and seen over a lunch, over a coffee, even over a Zoom. It doesn't, in person's always nicer, but finding those places and being good about not putting it off till next month or whatever, but building that in as a practice, I think is so important. Seeing friends on the weekend and kind of just being present with them and having them be present with you, so important.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm going over time myself. No, but that's why another part of my life, which is 1 hour a week, I give a fitness class, right?
Super.
And it's just a training class. It's just people come and we do training and that's it. But the thing is, there's no you can't sort of use the phone. There's like 1 hour. You're there in the room. We're gonna work our butts off together. I'll be screaming and whatever, like I do. But it's not, for that hour, we are there and then, and everybody's present, and you cannot not be present. And the same with you're doing your yoga retreat this weekend, right?
Exactly.
And just,
same thing.
But it closes out everything else, and you find yourself there and then, and you find yourself looking up going, oh, wow, I'm here. And you're here. Wow, look at this. I'm actually in it. It's an amazing.
Brilliant. It's brilliant. That's a great example.
Oren, thank you so much.
Oh,
thank you. Also, we could do this all day.
My pleasure. This is amazing.
Oren Ipp, find him on LinkedIn. I'll connect Hannah. I'll connect you with Oren because you need to get talking to each other. This national Swedish project about leadership. And thanks for listening in. Thanks, Matteo, for asking some questions as well. And
let's connect.
I'll see you all next week, 9 a.m. Innovation Fika, same time, same place. And but for now, I'll say.